All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Sambo?
We have Wheel of Time, Reread, Crossroads of Twilight, and we are getting to, I had to put up my authoritarian books like The Prince and 48 Laws of Power because we're getting to our resident totalitarian regime of
Oh,
Egwene.
come
But
on now.
I have some there's something that happened here in the old wood, the Friends Wood, that goes right into it this because our we may have to have a whole episode on this, but the libertarians aren't all wrong. That the whole blindly back the blue
Yeah.
was an overreaction to the defund the police. Both are stupid.
hmm
And what we had yesterday was apparently some random a-hole high school boy posted on his Snapchat story a picture that depicted, and it was what wasn't clear what the picture was because the person I was getting it from, we'll get to why it's ridiculous that this happened, but he was just flipping through his stories and he saw it. But it was a picture of a kid with I'm going to shoot up the school kind of stuff on it, rhetoric on it.
hmm
So that kid, yes, should get in trouble because he's being an a-hole. And everybody's people need to be sensitive about these kind of things a little bit.
Yeah.
But what they did was, so here's the big thing on this. Everybody who flipped through their story and saw it was quarantined by the police, questioned, interrogated. Their phones were confiscated, uh, and they were held for hours. These high school boys, they were held for hours, isolated by the police, interrogated by the police, and their phones confiscated and sorted through by the police. No warrant.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this
So
works.
that's bad enough on the surface, but guess what? You people out there that think Snapchat is safe because the things are deleted as soon as you look at them, they're monitoring everything.
Yeah.
And why look at your phone if they can't access what was supposed to be deleted on there? But that's the thing. They were flagged as domestic terrorists, possible shooters, just for seeing the picture by the government.
Yeah, that's, the same government that says if you see something, say something. Well, apparently not, because oh yeah, this is a good way to get in trouble is to say something, and then now all of a sudden you've got everybody you even remotely know getting dragged in and interrogated. Um, which if these are high school boys, that's another level of illegality because I am pretty sure the police cannot question a minor without parental involvement.
Well, the kid that's my client is 17, so that's technically not a minor in Texas, but still they can't confiscate your phone and go through it without a warrant.
No. Well, it is not it is technically not a minor in criminal law. You can be charged as an adult, but you are still legally a minor for all other purposes of consent and things like that. So,
Yeah, at minimum, parents should have been called to
mhm.
come bring their kid for questioning or something, and then the parent could get a lawyer if they wanted to or not. Yeah, there was no Miranda rights. There was no nothing. They weren't taken from the high school, but they were isolated within the high school from each other. Yeah, he was asked by one of the cops if he was afraid. Speaking of the picture, if that made him afraid, and but the question was phrased as he didn't say specifically the picture, just knew that's what he was talking about, and we were joking about it after because he was like, I should have been quicker. He's like, afraid of the totalitarian police state? Yes, I'm afraid. And we were just trying to have fun with it because the moment was over and we were all pissed, and this dad is getting he knows very high powered lawyers because he's a very very high powered person within a big company, and we were just joking. He should have been started going through the hall. It's the violence inherent in the system. I'm being repressed. I'm being repressed. Well, they wouldn't let him eat because he had been taken right before his lunch, and he's like, "Well, can I get something to eat or whatever?" And they're like, "No, no, no." We're like, "You should have just like collapsed." and pretended you went hypoglycemic or something. But no, it's just ridiculous. It's just
There
ridiculous
should
the
be
way
consequences for
they're
something like this. Yes, serious ones.
yeah. The problem is you get on the little friends with moms and dads and stuff. All the mommies are this is why mommies are very susceptible to totalitarian governments because they're like, they're just keeping our kids safe.
By threatening your kids.
Well,
Well,
from the potential bad person with a
this
gun.
actually, ties into these chapters because a lot of there have been numerous instances through Egwene's storyline since Fires of Heaven where you get it from her perspective where she's mentally crossing her fingers because she knows if these other Aes Sedai, if they call her bluff, she doesn't have anything. So the only
Well, she's
reason
got a couple slaves.
they're vassals.
Indentured servants.
Yeah. We'll get into yelling about Egwene later. But the point being, um, it's she gets away with it because they let her get away with it, and because it started small and there wasn't any pushback. And so, which was what she was counting on. Her and Sawan both. That's part of their scheming is if we can get away with this, then we have set a precedent, and we can keep making incremental steps forward until we get to the
Oh,
big,
it's like
the
that
big reveal.
concept creep we always talk about.
Yeah, yeah, and it was Jordan. This is another. I really wish he was around to pick his brain because this is another one of those. Was this on purpose or does he just know human nature this well? Because he makes the point explicitly a couple of times. The first one, because we have a counterpoint to Egwene, which is Elida, who's even worse. And somebody makes the point early on
Well,
that
can I make a comparison for the greater good aspect of that? Elida is Hitler and Egwene is Stalin.
well, that's going too far, but
You're allying with
I,
Stalin to
but
defeat Hitler.
um who was it? There was a sitter that was stripped of her position and then stripped of the shawl. And somebody makes the point that Aleda was able to do it because she let her do it. That this person should have rejected that. No, you don't have the authority to do that, and I'm not going along with it. Alida got away with it because this extreme punishment was accepted by that person, which then had follow on effects because then Elida just kept getting worse and worse and more authoritarian, more and more dictatorial. And then the other time Jordan makes this very explicit point is with Malhidian, which she accepted that the collar was real. Even for a split second, that was enough for Nynaeve to make it hold. And so that was her ultimate downfall. And then we'll get even more of that. We've alluded to it, coming up in the next book when there's a big fight inside Telon-Riyadh, inside the world of dreams, and Perrin shows what a bad mamma jamma he is.
Did we want to do comments first, like before, or we?
I didn't think about that, so I hadn't looked at the comments to see what's going on there. Because last time it was kind of half and half of spoilery and stuff we could just address right off the
Yeah,
top.
but one of the reasons we've been kind of doing them first is because they're more in with respect to the last episode.
Right.
So it's actually a little more chronological. So let's go ahead and go through them. I think Lanfear and Ishii are more understandable because they are the two Jordan expanded on for us more than the others. Yeah, that there is that part of it because although he fleshes out Giggity Grendel a lot as well.
Especially later.
Yeah, she's very pivotal for how things go. I think they were also the most extreme in their motivations, which is probably why they're more understandable. She was the jaded lover,
Yeah.
and he was the nihilist. Let's see. I never understood why the Shido continued to follow Savannah, especially the wise ones who really should have resisted the corruption of their people, the violation of tradition and Isle culture. Individual Shido Ale all seem to have abandoned honor. Even for people who aren't described as honorless dogs, it seems unbelievable that so many would comply.
Well,
I get your analogy of Nazi Germany about the masses just going along with the wrongness and evil. Hitler and his inner core were master propagandists. And as soon as the nationalists had control of the news media, and common people never saw the horror. And where have I heard this before? Yeah, all over our channel, right? Uh,
well, this she's another example of the you let it happen and then you just keep going down this road until you get to the point where they're at, where Roland and his people are looking at what's going on, and they don't say this, but and we never get a perspective from him, but I think you get the clear sense that um that he's probably not the only one, feel like they've been backed into a corner. I don't want to be here. This isn't right, but I've gone too far.
well, and add the dynamic. This is the part I don't think we've hammered enough. Their culture has developed over 3,000 years in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And it developed from a failure that
Mm.
they felt responsible for. And so it kind of over 3,000 years, which is a lot longer than Christianity has existed on our earth, right? And think of that, how embedded that is. So you get 3,000 years later, and the end result is an honor culture, but an honor culture around fighting,
This
around.
is, I don't know why I've never thought of this before. And now I'm curious if Jordan ever made any comments on this, but you mentioning, bringing up that they have been effectively in isolation for all this time. It's Japan at the end of the shogunate, where these outsiders come in and they completely disrupt the system, and you have complete chaos as people try to hold on staunchly, strictly to the tradition. Then you have others who completely throw it away, and then
Mhm.
you have others who are trying to accommodate the new. So there's a lot of that mid 19th century Japan in this that I feel stupid for not noticing, because that was one of my focuses
Yeah. So
in
now
my
remember
in my studies.
the fact that there was just a big giant reveal that everything we thought was honor
Mm,
wasn't what we thought it was. In fact, it was
yeah.
quite the opposite. And so you're going to have it's going to be a shock to the system. And so now you've got a whole bunch of people saying, well, what is honor?
Well,
But they're also so ingrained in that culture that they can't help but do it the way they've done it.
and,
So the
and, and
Shido are kind of stuck
yeah,
in between,
and add
and they
this
got some
wrinkle
bad
into it as
influence. Yeah.
add this wrinkle into it as well, is that the the chiefs, the clan and sept chiefs, are supposed to be a counterpoint to the wise ones, and the wise ones are a counterpoint to the chiefs. The Shido have no chief. They have Savannah acting as the chief, but they have no chief. And then you add the other wrinkle of, so the wise ones have no counterpoint, but then the wise ones have also boxed themselves in, because Tharava, besides the fact that Savannah has political allies, Tharava and her cabal can't just get rid of her, because then they would undermine their own authority,
Mm-hmm.
because they have been going along with Savannah and then gone to the point where they have accepted her as a wise one, for crying out loud. So they've compounded their own difficulty, and it's we try not to get too political on this side, but Tuesday there were off-year elections, and the Republicans got trounced, which seems stupid on the surface, because the out of power, especially when things are terrible economically, and then you add on the terrible cultural, the out of power party is supposed to gain. Well, but this is what happens when you spend decade upon decade choosing the lesser of two evils. You get to a point of stupidity and stagnation.
Yeah. The
Which to put hit the nail on the head here. The point being, that's what the Shido and the Brotherless have done essentially. Is, I can't accept this, that Rand and what he said and what he represents, so I'm going to go along with this, even though deep down, or maybe even not that deep, most of these Brotherless have to know that these people aren't right either. This isn't the way either. But they're they have accepted a binary choice, and so they've gone that way. And
Well,
you
and
see the
also,
people who don't accept the choice just throw down their spears and walk away.
and add to it the supernatural too, because they were also presented with a very believable lie based on how they've been living their lives.
Mm.
So we've got two stories. One of them supports what we thought was true to begin with. One of them is the complete opposite. Yes, all the clan chiefs came forward and said this, but it's a want to believe. The Shido want to believe because that's their clan.
Mm.
And so yes, and remember a lot of Shido left too. That was where Melinja came from.
Mm.
A lot of Shido had left their clan too. But there's a want to because it's their clan. There's a want to because it's what they've always known. There's a want to because they can't stand the real truth. And then there's a want to because it was a very believable lie based on what Asmodean did to Couladin.
Well,
In all, to all extensive purposes, he looked like he went to
yes.
Ryan and got the dragons. So all of those things combined is going to play to what you want to be true.
You know, I think Jordan hints at this in the opening of Fires of Heaven when Rand is talking to the chiefs that have come to join him. And I never really picked up on it, and I don't think we talked about it, but add to that, the wise ones and the chiefs never actually acknowledge the truth. They passively acknowledge it by declaring that Rand is the Karakarn.
Hmm.
But that's the only acknowledgement they give to Rand as the one telling the truth here. They never actually publicly admit this is our true history. They just passively admit it, which I think that has to add to the chaos, the disruption, and the mass form psychosis, if you will, of what happens to the Aiel. Because uh, there is no leadership there about in dealing with this hard reality.
Right. Number 3, there's a mile of difference between complying and collaborating. What was that a comment about?
I assume that was in reference to what happened to collaborators after the Allies took over. You see this in the scene in Band of Brothers during Operation Market Garden, where they're shaving the women's heads and they're scrawling swastikas on their foreheads and stuff. Okay, there is a mile of difference between complying and collaborating, which was my point, is that there should be, but that line was blurred because of the outrage so many people felt because of the occupation, that if you just slept with a Nazi,
Oh yeah.
that you were, you know, you were abused, if not killed. And the point was, a lot of these people felt like they were backed into a corner. They didn't have a choice, and a lot of them didn't have a choice, which was an ugly reality of what happened there.
And that's where the innocent until proven guilty mentality is so powerful, because when the line is that blurred, you can still protect yourself from collaborators without lumping everybody into that kind of bundle with willy-nilly and now also hurting 10,
I thought this was done really well. Did you watch Battlestar Galactica?
No, never was big on that.
Yeah. It was mostly really good. I thought that the writers, I think, dropped the ball in some instances, but I thought I can't remember if it was the 3rd season or the beginning of the 4th season where they deal with this, where there's this kind of secret tribunal that is dealing with the people who were collaborating with the Cylons. And I thought the writers did a very good job of portraying the difficult decisions on both sides. Anyway, let's move on. Because I think 300 easily makes my list of the worst movies ever. The dialogue is as bad as a 50s two-reeler, and the CGI is awful. I won't say the CGI is awful because, again, it is a graphic novel brought to life on screen. So it looks like a moving graphic novel. And that's why I liked it, because yeah, the dialogue and the action to me were very reminiscent of the schlocky but cool and fun 80s action movies.
Mhm.
Um and the stylized nature of the CGI, I think, is what made it work, because yeah, it's bad, but because of the kind of sepia tones that everyone tried to mimic after that, it it works in in the total package. I think it makes it work. It doesn't work for all the copycats because
Mm.
they didn't get the right mix of uh cheesy but fun.
Well, it's also not just the wrong mix. It's the fact that, okay, this was novel,
Yeah.
and now it was novel. It was, to me, it was fun. I don't take it as a serious movie for by any means,
Mm-hmm.
but it was fun, and it was fun enough to maybe rewatch once or twice. I'm not going to put it on my shelf as a classic or anything, but then once you have something novel and fun, the part of the fun is the novelty. And when you have copycats come along, it's not novel anymore.
Mm-hmm. All right.
What's the
Um,
next one?
yeah. Uh, I think both Elaine's and Parent's storylines are too long. I'd hate to accuse Jordan of padding, but it almost takes on that thread. Um, yeah, anyone else you would say you're just padding the runtime, but with Jordan, I think it more was he thought he needed to tell all of this to him. I think he thought this had to be part of the story, and that was a big part of what Harriet did, is try and keep him focused. But as the narrative just ballooned, it got to be worse. Those are the two most egregious examples, but they're not the only examples. They're just the worst, I think.
We talk about the mortal aspect of it, where he didn't have much time at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson that said something to the extent of, I would have written you a shorter letter had I had the time?
It sounds like a Franklin witticism, but yeah, I don't remember who. I don't remember who that
It might have
was.
been Franklin, because I think it was a letter to the French, but it
Mm.
was but at the same time, I want to introduce another element that I kind of just thought about. Matt's storyline is really just getting going, and there's a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up in there. What if this was also an attempt to keep Perrin and Elaine in the story without just leaving them for a while you deal with all the stuff you have to do with Matt and Rand?
Yeah,
Because you don't want to just leave Perrin out for another 2 books, or Elaine out for another couple books, and be like, and we're nearing the end, so here's Elaine again. By the way, she has Camelin. She's the queen now.
hmm
So it was an attempt to keep them in the reader's mind while all these other stories that are more complicated are going on right now.
Well, according to my quick search here, it is oft attributed to Mark Twain, but it's another. It's one of those. Yeah, we don't know who actually said this or where it came from, because
Either way, it's a great
you know,
quote.
yeah,
It would be believable from Mark Twain, because he had those quips too.
hmm yeah. Um,
Okay, the next one's a spoiler. Oh, but I don't think it's. Oh, yeah, I see the part of it that was a spoiler, but we can address the second half. Rand may be the best swordsman in the world. I think Jordan kept things like that very vague,
mhm.
because I think one of the reasons is Jordan didn't. He wanted Rand to be the Dragon Reborn. He wanted him to be the most important thread in the pattern, but that doesn't mean you make somebody the best at everything.
Yeah.
And I think if you make them the best at everything, they become just a Superman.
He established at the beginning of the Great Hunt, well, even before then, when Lan was giving them a little bit of training at the beginning of the Eye of the World, he commented that they were all naturally athletic,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the Great Hunt, in the opening when he's training them, he makes mention that he shows him a form, and he gets it really quickly. It's just a matter of practicing it so it flows naturally. So he is a very good natural swordsman. Whether or not he's the best in the world, he does leave that vague, and I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, well, and when you think about it, just realistically in real life, to be the best at something, you really have to specialize in it.
Mhm.
And Rand's got a few different directions he's got to focus his mind. He's got to be a politician. He's got to be great with the power. He's got to be great with the sword. He learned to
To
fight
be
with
great
hands
with the
and feet.
ladies.
Yeah, he's got to do his time in bed. He's got to handle, well, I said politics, but the politics itself is all over the place because
Yes,
he's an emperor. He's not a
there's
king.
different layers to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's spread a little more thin than someone who is the greatest swordsman and can focus on being a swordsman. And I think the same for Lan, because Lan at this point is honing his skills in battle when it happens versus actually being taught by other great swordsmen.
Um, did you skip this Elaine one on purpose? Because I don't really think that's
Oh,
spoilery.
oh no, I
Uh,
did not skip it on purpose, and that was my favorite one.
how different would Elaine's story be if her useless brother had returned and done his duty? None,
How
because he's useless and she's an arrogant twit.
how different would the whole eh, rest of the books be as far as that whole
Well,
everybody involved?
I you know you, the problem is the way Jordan writes it, and the frustrating part is because he would just be another voice saying the things that Brigitte is always saying, and she would just ignore them both. It is what the character he wrote. That's the most logical result of that would be that no, she would still do what she does because she thinks she knows better and that she's invincible.
Yeah, no, but I think the undertone of the question there from Scott is he's useless because he's not there.
Okay, yes, he's not where he's supposed to be. He's not where he should be.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a little bit of that in the next couple of books of he realizes that and he's trying to figure it out, but he doesn't figure it out, and he doesn't figure it out quick enough, and he continues to be a moron while he's trying to figure it out. That is a good point on the uselessness, though. It's he's useless because he's just kind of floating out in space there.
Yeah, and the next one is Uno and Geidel. Yeah, we
Yes.
were just kind of bitching and moaning about the show. Of course, they never established how time works with the heroes for the horn. So, and they never established Brigitte was a romantic partner with him. They just put her next to him
Yeah.
in the thing. But yeah, this was one of the big stinks. Remember, everybody was talking about Ulver being and they were like, well, the age is wrong, da, 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 and we always get the well, time works different in Telar and Riyadh, but we also don't actually see him, but we know he's present during the time that Ulver's alive in real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again is, as we've been complaining about, the show keeps writing itself into corners that it doesn't need. It doesn't need to box itself in this way. But now you've got a problem here where you can't have him in Teleron Riyadh later because then everyone would know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the people that Brigitte is interacting with, Perrin and Nynaeve, uh, they would all go, "Oh, hey, Uno, what's up?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
So
they could have Jordan could have still easily he could have even put us further down the over rabbit hole by establishing a concept of someone who's born into the real world, again, spun back into the pattern, dreams of themselves when they sleep.
mm,
And it would have been you could have actually still kept that ball rolling as far as Ulver being too old because he could have been sleeping in the real world and he thinks he's just having a regular dream of being a hero because I'm a kid and I do that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But it's actually his presence in the world of dreams. That's
I don't know that this was ever confirmed, but um, oh, you wait. The son of Aemon, the one that Shidar Logoth imprisoned, reborn. Uh, it is strongly implied that Matt and Egwene are the last king and queen of Manetheren reborn. It is strongly implied. I don't think Jordan ever confirmed that, uh, you know, directly, but it is strongly implied through the books, and that was a favorite theory on the forums for a very long time.
Yeah,
That
I'm on
that's
Theory Land right now.
that yeah, that Matt and Egwene both are the reborn last king and queen of Manetheren. Um, and part of that was the Matt, even before the memories, the old blood ran strongly in him, and he was shouting
Yeah,
out
that was
random
evidence number
phrases.
one. Evidence number two, Min's first viewing of Matt includes a red eagle, which if Matt is Aemon, he would definitely have. Blah blah blah. That yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to be all loose connections.
Hmm.
Maybe we can go further into it in spoilers. I'll leave it up.
All right.
We'll maybe share the screen later. Okay, that was the last one. Unless I skipped another one.
No. All right. So, uh, so now I have to start defending Egwene. Uh, just overall, I will say that I take exception to you calling her Stalin. Stalin's a very bad man, and I have argued that he was worse than Hitler. Um, I think a better
No,
analogy is
the analogy was siding was something not good fighting for the greater good, and everybody around them
see, I
ignoring the
I
not
am
good about them.
I am much more charitable, and I'll compare her to Lincoln because Lincoln was tyrannical, because he had to be to keep the Union together. And in fact, if you go back, I ranted about one of my favorite YouTubers, Razor Fist, the Rageaholic channel. He made a very long video. I think the title is Lincoln, American Tyrant. Um, he was tyrannical. However, not everything he did was out of bounds, because the Constitution does actually give the commander in chief more leeway on certain things. There, like habeas corpus, it specifically says can be suspended during a time of war. Now, there was never actually a official declaration of war, which was a problem. But that's a problem of Congress that we continue to this day. Uh, the point being, uh, he and I again I wonder. This is a kind of a new thought, and I've never thought of this before. I wonder if that was one of the inspirations, considering Gareth Bryan. Gareth Bryan, he said one of the inspirations was Robert E. Lee, even to the point where his horse shares the same name as Robert E. Lee's horse, Traveler. Um,
That's why Jordan's problematic.
exactly.
It has
So
nothing to do with his portrayal of women.
so I do wonder if that was a purposeful influence, was and a good example of this is the movie Lincoln, which I think got mixed reviews, but I thought uh oh, I just brain farted on his name. Super Mr. Method, who's always way too into his parts. God, why am I brain farting on his name? Last of the Mohicans guy. Come on, help me out here. Someone throw me a bone. I thought he did a great job as Lincoln. Tommy Lee Jones always does a great job, and he's in it. But the point is, it's really showing you the political side of Lincoln that you don't see often, and you don't we don't talk about as much, of what he had to wrangle, the you know the different threads that were kind of pulling on him, and he had to kind of maneuver through all of this in order to get
Daniel Day
uh,
Lewis.
Daniel Day Lewis. Thank you. Yeah. So these are all the different things that he had to maneuver, and I think there's a very strong allegory there with Egwene, that this is what she's trying to do, and yeah, that means sometimes she goes too far. Sometimes she is tyrannical. Sometimes she's a downright an a-hole. Um, Very famously, Lincoln and Washington both, they've been kind of or were, before we started tearing everything down, literally, they were kind of idolized, especially in base level history. But if you go back and read accounts of the time, they had infamous tempers. And they could both back it up. They were both exceptional wrestlers. Uh, in fact, Washington, even while he was a general, would sometimes solve problems by not having a duel, but by having a wrestling match. with someone. If they strongly disagreed with them, he'd challenge them to a match and he'd whoop them.
Yeah, but you know what? Also, from a self-preservation standpoint, that that might be beneficial because you're like, I can die in a duel. If I lose a wrestling match, I just lost the argument.
Well, and yeah, you're not going to have a duel with one of your, subordinate generals who you need to do things,
Well,
you
and
know.
you're also not, your subordinate general doesn't want the main general to be dead either.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's uh but both of them kind of they had these infamous tempers, and they did both. Washington, more so than Lincoln, worked really hard to keep his in check. He saw it as a failing of his, that he tried to keep in check. Um, and you get that with Egwene, I think that and that's what I appreciate from Jordan's style is you're actually getting her thoughts. So you can see her rationalizing, you can see her, you know, struggling and going back and forth on certain issues. And you can see her not liking some of the things she has to do. Uh, like I think there's a point, I don't remember exactly which chapter it's in. It's when she goes in to see the novices, and the others practicing making Heartstone. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it because I'll probably do it wrong because I pronounce everything wrong. Um, and and she has this thought about Nicola, who's been a problem since Fires of Heaven, and she has this thought of maybe I should have let Sawan take care of her, and she's shocked by this thought. But this is the place you've put yourself in. That you shouldn't be shocked because you keep taking steps that have led you to this point. But at least, and this is why I defend her though, because at least she recognizes sometimes, at least, that this isn't good. Even if she still does it, even if she feels like she has to, she at least still recognizes, ugh, this is detestable.
Yeah, I think that's where Scott and I are, though, is she'll recognize it in her head, still do it, and then even if it's the wrong thing, like you said, sometimes she goes too far,
Mm-hmm.
then she post hoc justifies her actions.
Yeah, but where I think she's got such a great character arc, even if she's not a great or likable character, is that, and this is the frustration we've talked about with Elaine, she at least suffers consequences for it. I mean, she does suffer. She has problems with the Hall because of some of the decisions she makes. She alienates some of her close allies because of the decisions she makes. And then we'll see at the end of the book, she suffers a very personal physical consequence to one of the decisions she has to make, and she's dealing with that through the whole of the next book. So at least she suffers consequences, um, that Elaine never has to deal with, and it's really annoying and frustrating. um, but the other thing that is a quasi defense, but not really, but this is more of a defense of the arc, rather than of her. So chapter 16 is where we're at in the hardback. Chapter 16, page 391, and we've got the bull icon because she's standing and talking to Gareth Bryne at the beginning, and you're getting a again, with this all started to point out why the book works and why the show didn't and doesn't. And here you have a great example. Rather than just Egwene sitting in her tent getting an exposition dump from her general about the state of the siege, he gives us an actual scene, a moment, and then you get both explanation and context clues so you can know, okay, they've laid siege to Tarvalon. It's been going on a couple weeks. This is the state of things. This is what they're planning, or at least what Bryne is planning, and what's going on. Um, in a moment, it's not like an action, scene, but there is activity going on. So it pulls you into the story a lot better than the exposition dumps that writers of these days are relying on more and more and more, which makes things so boring. All right. But something jumped out at me here in the first few pages of this chapter, which I think encapsulates Egwene's character, and it's on 396. Uh, that this is who she's always been. So, like Scott, especially, and you complain that she changes. because she kind of gets captured by the White Tower and becomes, a part of the bureaucracy, so to speak. But I don't I don't think it does. She changes. She doesn't change her principles. She changes the action she's going to take that reflect those principles. Because you look at this little uh, rant of hers in the middle of 396, and this is who she's always been, all the way back in the Eye of the World, when she always thought she knew better. She was headstrong to the point of arrogance from the very beginning, and I think this encapsulates this, because Bryne wants her to open up gateways and just drop his troops in the middle of Tar-Valon. It'll be ugly. Or, what is it he says here? Uh, I said let me back up here a second to the bottom of 395. This is Gareth Ryan talking. Every day you wait only adds to the butcher's bill we'll have to pay sooner or later. I've said from the start it will come to an assault in the end, and that hasn't changed, but everything else has. Have the sisters put me and my men inside the walls now, and I can take Tar-Valon. It won't be clean. It never is. But I can take the city for you, and fewer will die than if you delay. So this is his very practical view of, there are no solutions, only trade-offs from the beginning. And this was his, when he agreed to be their general, he said, all right, but this is how it's going to be. You're going to follow through because we're all putting our heads on the chopping block here.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has said from the beginning, this is going to be messy. This is going to be bloody. But as he says, it always is. When it comes to conflict like this, it's not a matter of keeping people from dying. It's a matter of how many people have to die before it ends.
Well, and I think this is one of the annoying things about Egwene's storyline is because he's right. And the only reason she gets away with not doing it is because something else happens.
No. I disagree, because the reason she keeps quiet here, she has a plan, but she can't tell anyone about it. It's like her and Sawan and Leanne know the plan, and that's it.
Yeah,
She
but that
has a
plan
plan
never
to deal with
works.
this. It mostly works.
No, the reason why Gareth's prophecy doesn't come to fruition is because something else happens that I will save for spoilers.
Well, I completely disagree, but
So we'll talk about
let's
that in
move on.
spoilers. Yeah.
Anyway, so back to the point I was making, which is, no, she repeated, I know people are going to die before this is over. And this is her thinking. The light helper, she could see them dying just by closing her eyes. Even more would die if she made the wrong decisions, though, and not just here. But, and I'm going to put some emphasis here, but I have to keep the White Tower alive against Tarmangaiden, to stand between the world and the Ashaman. And the tower
Which I have
will
a problem with
die.
that statement too,
Yep.
because she's still separating them out, and they have to protect the world from men.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the tower will die if this comes to sisters killing one another in the streets of Tar-Valon. That had already happened once. It could not be allowed a second time. If the White Tower dies, hope dies. I shouldn't have to tell you that again.
Except nobody trusts the White Tower and everybody hates it. So there are a lot of people in the
Well,
world that
no,
hope
but
the White Tower is humbled.
no, but you are correct. However, she is right in that even those who despise the White Tower respect it. So whether it's right or not, the simple fact of 3,000 years of tradition means that the White Tower has a lot of sway in the world. And so if there's any, the Pope has a lot of sway in the world, even with non-Catholics, heck, even with non-believers. The greatest example being Pope John Paul, and what he did to help bring down communism. And very explicitly working with Thatcher and Reagan, who were not Catholic. But he and his office had that cachet, and he was able to wield it to the good. And so Egwene's not completely wrong, because the White Tower is that, analogy, but purposely so. It's the Vatican. It is the very clear allegory, is the White Tower. Tar-Valon is the Vatican. So she's wrong in that she thinks she can completely avoid what Bryne is saying here, with her plan. She thinks her plan is that good. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's more complicated than that. But yeah, and now you have the new pope. That's why I used a couple of popes ago as my example.
Yeah, my pretty much my whole immediate family is Catholic, and the a good chunk of them are also uber Trumpers, and so they're always screaming about the trans issues and everything, and I'm just like, but isn't it the doctrine of Catholicism that the
Yeah.
Pope is right? What the
Well,
Pope
no,
says is right?
only when he speaks in a specific way about specific things. But he
It's
is still the leader, and he is still, speaking for, in a general colloquial lowercase s sense. But yes, there are times where he can make a declaration that is supposed to have basically as much or almost as much authority as the Gospels.
Yeah,
Uh,
and but that is actually though a specific thing. It was about baptism, the thing I just brought up, which
mhm,
is kind of I think a sacred thing in Catholicism,
mhm.
in Christianity in general. I might be wrong. I only
Well,
uh,
again, this is where the allegory works actually, because that wasn't technically issued by the Pope. That was issued by uh, that was issued by a group that the cardinals might be considered the hall, in this, continuing on with this allegory. So it was them who issued it, but it still has the Pope's
he's
authority because it's the
well he's
authority of the Vatican.
well
Because
he signed off on it himself though.
yes, and then
Yeah,
he has to sign off on it.
yeah,
So it that that adds to the muddle, that adds to the confusion in the same way that the hall does here, because you have different people with different uh, ideas on the issues, as well as different agendas, which are going to influence and color how they look at things. And that's part of, that's Egwene here too. Is her agenda is, I, I can put the tower back together, and the tower must be whole, because it is the only hope for humanity in Tarmangai. And let's ignore the fact that Rand is the actual Dragon Reborn, but whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so the tower must be whole because we have all these problems to deal with before we can get to the biggest problem, which is Tarmangayden looming over the horizon. But the point being, you can tweak the words here, and you could put this paragraph in the eye of the world. She is who she's always been. The circumstances have just changed. Um, I don't really have any other. I mean, I have a lot of bookmarks here to skip through almost 200 pages worth of stuff here. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so I don't know how much of it we actually want to talk about. Um, you get a lot of, because we didn't get very much of them in the last book. You get a lot of the you see, again, he doesn't tell you, see what's going on with Egwene's declaration. You saw a little bit of it in that blurb we got. I think it was at the end of, was it the end of Path of Daggers, where it actually shows them traveling to Tar Valon. Uh, and then in White Winter's Heart, we don't really see what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
We see Egwene a little bit and know something's going on. So you saw a little bit of it there in that blurb where they traveled, because you saw the ludicrous number of novices. He already Jordan already told you about that, showed you that. But now we're getting, okay, what does that actually mean to these sisters and what they have to deal with and how it's going to work? And I am amused by uh, some of the conflicts that arise uh, uh, because of things like Sharina is a fun example of this grandmother who was used to running this large extended family, uh, and and so she's very self-assured. She's very, you know, a very proactive, take charge kind of person, and it annoys the sisters when it shouldn't. It's not the way it's supposed to be, and they're used to uh well, as they say, and I think it's actually in the second chapter. Um, oh no, it was this one because it's this one where she goes to see the tent where they're making the Heartstone, and I think the inference there is that Sharina is perfectly deferential as she should be because she is a novice, but she isn't obsequious. She respects the sisters. She doesn't fear them. And
Hmm.
I think the implication there is that the ego of the sisters, they like that about the novices and the accepted. They like that these are children who are uh uh viewing the full sisters with not just respect but awe and a little bit to a lot of fear. And
Hmm.
it annoys them that Sharina doesn't do that.
Yeah, they get all the proper honorifics without the ego boost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she doesn't overstep herself. She is, I mean, at the end here, she's the one who tells him, "All right, you, it's time to go to your next class. Get up and go." Um, but then she properly excuses herself and basically and asks permission of the not of the keeper of novices. You know, I need to go do this thing. You know, with your leave. So she's perfectly respectful, but yeah, there's no ego stroking there, and it annoys the sisters.
Yeah, and almost you wonder how much everybody has a little bit of a little bit of sadism in there, that they almost hope somebody messes up every once in a while so they can kind of take their own temper, get their own little mental release out. But also, okay, so now take that one, that different personalities. These sisters also remember when they were a novice. And it's got to be humbling in their own mind that why can she do this thing that we were never able to do perfectly?
uh, Bill Cosby has this hilarious bit on being a kid, being a teenager, and trying to scare the crap out of your friends, and then you would get all pissed off and yell at them about, you know, that ain't funny, that ain't funny. But now you got to go find someone else to scare the crap up, you know, after this rant about how wrong that was. But since it happened to you, now I gotta get my own by scaring the crap out of someone else. Or, oh, this tastes terrible. Here, taste this.
That
Um,
that's the Sapolsky, the baboons. They spend most of their entire day making each other miserable.
yeah, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. About there's got to be this other layer of, you know, resentfulness that uh I was so meek and not just humble, but sometimes humiliated when I was a novice and even accepted because, you know, it was so hard for me. You know, you should have to suffer that too. And she's clearly not suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So I hadn't thought about that layer as well. All
Well,
right.
and it's one of the reasons power corrupts. It's not just the material things you get from it. It's the remembering of when you were the one not having the power,
Mm,
and the way you felt then. Someone else has to feel that now.
you know, I didn't even notice that. Oh wait, that was a totally separate chapter, chapter 17, and we just buzzed right through that. So moving on to chapter 18. Um, so a chat with Sawan. This is I feel like this is, and I think we've talked about this before. This is another one of those times where I feel like Jordan dropped the ball, or maybe I just didn't get what he was trying to say, which is this puzzle about the ages of the sitters. And we saw it on the other side earlier with inside the tower, where someone noticed this and was like, "What? And what's going on here?" This is they noticed this oddity, and Sawan has noticed it, and now Jordan's bringing our attention back to it and talking about it explicitly. I don't know how y'all feel, but I feel like this secret, this puzzle, didn't deliver. It really fizzles for me when you actually find out what's going on, and it's, oh, okay, who cares? Whatever. I mean, maybe that was the point though, is who cares, whatever, because there's this, you know, there's this secret, there's this quasi conspiracy going on, and it leads to absolutely nothing. And that may have been the whole point all along, is to show you the futility of what some people are trying to do. And I'll just leave it at that for outside of spoilers, but just as as a delivery, as far as the writing of it goes, this was one of the times where I go, yeah, I don't think that worked, Jordan.
Yeah, and like you said, there might be more to add to it in spoilers, but it was so not special that you kind of forgot about the event by the time you get to why it might have had some significance.
Hmm.
So it wasn't one of those, oh, now I see what he was doing
Yeah,
there
yeah,
a
yeah.
book later. It was
It was, huh?
it
That's what's
was
going on.
it was something happened later and you're like, oh, crazy. And then you reread it and you're like, oh, he did kind of tell us that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it wasn't a big wow moment like some of his other reveals
Mm-hmm.
have been, or All right. Anyway, um, oh, I remember why I bookmarked this. Okay, so page 448. This was more of me being forced to defend Egwene because she's not that bad. But this is in her conversation with Swan, and she's talking about the kinswoman, and she reveals her plan of um letting Aes Sedai unbind themselves and retire into the kin. Um, and 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 to me, this is the reason I bookmarked this is an example of what I said earlier, is that she still is who she is. Her principles haven't changed. She's just changed the details of how she executes those principles, of how she acts on them, because she's still being very iconoclastic here. She's still being very rebellious to tradition. So much so that she's having to keep what she wants. She's scheming on how she's going to be able to implement a new tradition because she knows that the rest of the sisters will lose their s over this because it's so counter to the way things have always been. But she still sees um she still sees the tower itself as kind of sacrosanct, as
Which is her short-sightedness here,
yes.
because the rest of the world doesn't see the tower as the thing that makes the oaths necessary. It's the fact that they can wield the power.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just release a bunch of people that can still wield the power just to have them live longer from those oaths, there's still people that have a corruptibility. There's still people that can use their power for their own. And there's still
Well,
people that could kind of get together in secret and
yes.
ultimately overthrow you.
Well, and that's through this is she no, the tower is at the top of any relationship, any organization. You get this a little bit, and it's a little bit skeevy when she's talking to the wise ones. I don't even remember what that was a couple books ago when she meets with Amos and the others and talks about working together, fostering a relationship, maybe sending some accepted to the wise ones to train the way they train because it helped her so much. Because knowing a full sister would never agree to that. So maybe send some accepted because they've learned enough to not hurt themselves and
Mm-hmm.
represent themselves properly, but also wanting, some of the wise one apprentices so that they could foster a relationship. But in her mind, and I think she says this to Sawan, is no, the tower always has to be at the top. That this will never be an equal relationship, which makes sense for the kin because these were people who wanted to go to the tower, tried to go to the tower, and couldn't make it. They didn't have what it took to be full sisters. And then, even if sisters go into it in retirement, that makes sense that the kin would be subordinate to the tower. But the idea of making the sea folk and the wise ones also subordinate to the tower is just silly.
Mm-hmm.
But and that is where she's a little bit short sighted because she holds the tower in such high esteem. Um,
I almost wonder if the Egwene storyline is one of the reasons Jordan felt the need to make the Aes Sedai in general so incompetent when it comes to these other cultures. It not even an on purpose thing, like an internal
mm,
balancing act. Like,
um, maybe, but I also wonder. I hadn't thought about this before, but we were talking when we were talking about the Scott's comments about the Shido is, we've we've been really hard on the Aes Sedai, but I wonder if part of the point of the Shido was to one of Jordan's themes is that people are people.
mm-hmm.
And so, oh my gosh, how could the tower let this happen? Well, the Aiel did it too. I mean, we just spent, you know, the prologue to the show was us ranting about the Aiel doing it, and they do it. It's just different, but they're still people. They're just different people, so it expresses itself differently. But I don't know why I never really drew this parallel before of the split in the Aiel with the Aiel and the Shido, and then even the what do they call it? The longing or whatever for the ones the third way that just throw their spears down
Mm-hmm.
and go join the Tinkerers or whatever. And you do have that uh with the Aes Sedai as well. It's mentioned that, and he gets this, I think, from I don't remember if it was Franklin or Adams that after the war said about a third of the the colonies, about a third of the people were loyalists, a third were rebels, and a third were just trying to stay out of it and see what happened. And you get those same numbers here. He makes that point way earlier. About a third of all Aes Sedai seem to be just sitting out, and you get that here in the Egwene chapters when they're talking about the Borderlander army in Brain Wood, and there seem to be a very large number of sisters there, and that seems to be a big chunk of the ones who are just I'm not going to involve myself in these internal politics because I want to see how things go. But then also for the ones with the Borderlanders, there's probably also an era of there are more important things we should be doing with our time, which is
Mm-hmm.
what Catsuman is doing as well. All right, so jumping to my next bookmark here is page 450, um, which is uh, me bashing Egwene, but then also kind of defending her because this is part of what's going on here and what they're thinking about and talking about is the what's going on in Karheen, which is very weird. Um, and right now all they're hearing is whispers. Um, so the bottom of page 450. In the beginning, there had only been whispers from the Ajaz or from Sawan's eyes and ears. There were Aes Sedai and Karheen, and they seemed to move freely in and out of the Sun Palace while the Dragon Reborn was there. Then the whispers grew hoarse and uneasy, hesitant. The eyes and ears in Karheen did not want to say it. No one wanted to repeat what their agents said. There were Aes Sedai and Karheen, and they seemed to be following the orders of the Dragon Reborn. Egads! Yes, it's terrible to follow the orders of the guy who's supposed to save us from the Dark
Well,
One,
no,
but I
not
digress.
only that is to follow the orders of the ruler of that place while
Um,
you're in that place doing things.
Worse were the names that trickled out. Some were women who had been in Saladar, among the first to resist Elida, while others were women known to be loyal to Elida. Why is that worse? To your point, doesn't that show that whatever's going on here is bipartisan?
Might be more important. Yeah.
Might be more important. But again, this is what we just talked about, Egwene's short-sightedness. The tower is the thing. Okay. Not the Dragon Reborn, but the tower is what is going to shield humanity from the Dark One and help and win the last battle. Um, no one had mentioned compulsion aloud that Egwene knew of, but they had to be thinking it. All right, we have ranted ad nauseum, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Of Egwene should know better. However, in Egwene's defense, we have also talked about how far down Rand has been spiraling in the last few books. So it would be easier to excuse Egwene though if she hadn't been such a bizitch previously when she definitely should have known better. I mean, you see this a lot when in Dragon or Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven when she's with Rand, and she should know better because he hasn't been flirting with darkness yet. In her defense now, uh, I now the Rand I know wouldn't do that, but is this the Rand I know? On the other hand, I do find it odd that through these chapters here, not once does she think about. I mean, she does contact Elaine to mention, hey, be on the lookout. Sisters may be stopping by, and things that we want secret need to stay secret. And she doesn't even think to go looking for Nynaeve and say, hey, where are you and what's going on? And more importantly, what's Rand up to?
Mm-hmm.
How is he and what is he doing? At no point does she think that, which strikes me as very odd. and so much so that I wish Jordan had given us some sort of reason why she doesn't, because it feels like a contrivance to me. Like I want to keep Egwene in the dark about what Rand is doing, So I'm not going to have her do the obvious thing, which is reach out to Nynaeve and say, "Hey, where are you? Are you with Rand? What's he doing? I need to know."
Yeah, but I think it only feels like a contrivance to you because you want to feel Egwene is good in some way, but to people like Scott and I, where she's just becoming an arrogant bitch, it's not so far
Well,
fetched because that's what women do. They assume they're right. They think they know everything, and that
well,
statement is going to get us canceled. But whatever.
well, no, but to me that makes it worse because if she's as bad as people like you and Scott think, then that is added reason, if not more reason, to contact Nynaeve because that's her leash on Rand. Is if she's going to try and control Rand, direct Rand, if you're going to be more charitable, then Nynaeve is her connection there. So even
Yeah,
more, she should be wanting to talk to Nynaeve.
except you got something on the other end, which is the availability of Nynaeve. She can't just go to the world of dreams like Egwene can.
Oh, that's right. If she doesn't have a ring, that's right.
Yeah.
They only had the one ring, not the one ring, but one ring. Um, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. She could give Nynaeve messages in her. That would have been a thing to do. Is to have her deliver a message to Nynaeve, even though she can't meet. I mean, the message to Elaine is meet me in the usable place, but we've seen her deliver messages in their dreams before. So it could be, hey, send me a message. I need to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he still would have been able to keep her in the dark about what Rand is doing. But to me, that would have made all the sense in the world of why doesn't she do this?
Yeah,
Uh,
and we don't know that she doesn't.
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It could be that she does do it, and there's no point in showing it because nothing's going to come of it.
Well,
Because
yeah, and
reasons.
I think where Scott and I are coming from in part is a little bit of a male bias. So I will admit it, you wokies out there. There's a little bit of a male bias here because there's that annoying thing that just kind of hits us right in that little spot where you can't, it just puts your hair up a little bit. That is the I know everything woman kind of mentality. And Egwene is kind of personifying that a lot.
That is a great segue to jump me like 100 pages here to my next note. That was 450, I think. So 490 is when she goes to meet Elaine and
Okay, so
Elaine,
we need to go back to math class.
shut up. I don't have to use math anymore. I have the textbooks around here. I have been meaning to actually go back to just for the fun of it of pull out the old calculus textbook, but then I realized I think I'd have to start at algebra. I've used math so little. I would be lost. I'd have to start at trig or something before I could do calculus again. Anyway,
Well, I was a little proud of my son because he's only in eighth grade, but I was doing my stats on the couch and he walks by and he goes, "Oh, lots of Greek letters there," and he kept walking.
um, so I do find it amusing that Elaine can't channel, which she was warned would happen while she was pregnant. It interferes with. I do find that interesting, and that's something we might ramble about at some point, just because is Jordan never explains why, but I find it an interesting mechanism that, well, what is it about being pregnant that makes you not be able to do this supernatural thing that you would think wouldn't be that linked? I mean, we do know there is a physical link because you get tired as you channel, so much so that it can be dangerous. But I find it interesting that pregnancy has these odd effects. Like you'll try and grasp the flows and they'll just slip away from you, as they do with Elaine here. Um, so I do find
It
it
might have to
interesting.
do with the morning sickness because Rand had trouble channeling when he would get sick. Do we get to that scene? I need to use this
uh,
one.
well, that was chapter 11, so that was a long time ago.
Oh,
Um,
that was in this book already?
it said caught chapter 11. I don't remember that though in chapter 11.
Yeah.
Um, oh, I remember her thinking about it because I remember her thinking about it way back because she was annoyed that she could only drink the goat's milk, but Birgitte could have wine and she could kind of feel it.
Okay, for those that just listen, it's a meme
Yeah.
that has someone that could be believably, it looks more like Britney Spears, but I don't know who it is, holding a goat's milk up against her head that is obviously photoshopped on, and it says, "When you're only allowed to drink goat's milk, but still get hungover secondhand through the water bond."
Give me a bath or give me death. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Um, all right, but anyway, the point was I enjoy the exchange here with Avienda, um, because there is a bit of a bittersweetness there from Egwene's perspective of this was a really close friend considering what they went through together as fellow apprentices. I mean, they they had a very strong bond in Fires of Heaven, and now there's that. It's like meeting a high school or a college friend that you haven't seen in a long time, and you used to be really close, but now it's our lives have just taken us away, and it's just not the same anymore. We don't have that connection anymore. So he Jordan does a really good job of setting that tone and giving you that feeling. Um, but then you also get some interesting insights, and you get, Avienda is clearly she isn't beneath the Amarillan seat, so she has no problems with telling Egwene she's being kind of dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay, I
which
see what you're talking about, jumping here, because it's basically the comment
mhm,
I made.
mhm. So on page 490, so Avienda is asking, you know, okay, but does this change things if with what's going on here? And are you sure this is going to be necessary or work? And Egwene makes the point, we do have to deal with the Black Tower sooner or later. Avienda and Moria was right. There are already too many Ashaman for any thought of gentling them, and that's if we dared think of gentling them before the last battle. Maybe a dream will show me another way, but none has so far. This does give us at least the beginning of a way to handle them. Emphasis mine. In any case, it's going to happen if the sitters can agree on anything besides the fact that they have to try for an agreement. So we must live with it. It might even be the best in the long run. Well, actually, yeah, that part is true, if not in the way that Egwene thinks, which is what is best in the long run is for the Ashaman and the sisters to be like the ones who are with Kadsuan,
Mm-hmm.
who are actually more of a partnership, especially good old Dahmer and his yellow. They very quickly you get the impression they're like an old married couple.
Yeah, or a
Um,
pair we see coming up in the next few books.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Um, but I love the response of Avienda here, and it's interesting because she would know because she lived in a very masculine world. So it shows she very literally walked miles in
Well,
their shoes.
finish your thought, and I
Yeah.
want to
So
expound on that.
you Aes Sedai always think men are fools. Quite often they are not. More often than you think, at least. Take a care with these Ashaman. Mazrim Taim is far from a fool, and I think he is a very dangerous man. But there's a bigger thought there than just the specific of don't think the Ashaman or Taim don't think these are fools, or you're going to get yourself in trouble. But I kind of think this is Jordan poking Egwene through Avienda because that applies to Rand as well, but Egwene can't see it or won't
Mm.
see it. Uh,
So
of
one thing I'll add a layer to this is one thing I appreciate about the way he wrote Aiel culture, in contrast to what we get with Egwene, is in Egwene's world, all we saw was bickering and nitpicking. And this might have been because they weren't actually in the adult world yet when they left, but
hmm,
bickering and nitpicking between the village circle and the women's circle, right? The village council and the women's circle, and they both thought they knew best, and they were always getting in each other's way. That's the way we got it from their perspective. We don't know
mhm.
what the real life
We
interaction
get a
was.
little bit of the real life though with Perrin in Perrin's story in The Shadow Rising.
Yeah, a
When
little
when
bit, but
he's
it still is a
yeah.
bickering kind of situation. But in Aiel culture, we brought it up at the beginning of this episode, because we're talking about Savannah, is the way the wise ones and the clan chiefs arrange themselves. It's they need us, we need them.
Mhm.
They're a two-part system, and the whole culture is kind of based around that, from the way the wise ones and the clan chiefs interact. They'll make little quips here and there, but they're you can always tell when he writes it that they're half joking.
Yeah.
Whereas we get Mir and Alvear earlier in the books, and she's not joking when she's like, "No, this is women's circle business. We're going to handle this part." And that was
Mhm.
even in Shadow Rising, because she took Fael and was like, "We're going to do this thing. We're going to leave the men out of it." Whereas with the wise ones and the clan chiefs, it's never we're going to leave the other out of it if it involves the whole clan. And Alviana grows up in that world too. So yes, she did spend time in the man's world of being a warrior, but she also is in a culture that has that duality.
Yeah, the more, I won't say bigger. The direct point here, though, is that um, so much of what we see in the interactions between men and women, and especially between the main characters, and so much of the reason that Egwene is the most notorious and perhaps most noteworthy, but that's because she's in the position as the most powerful as far as position of authority goes of the female characters, and her conflict is with the most powerful person in the whole book, which is Rand. And so much of the conflict is her assuming the worst and ascribing negative motivations, and that's because we don't know how the other side thinks because we think so differently. But Avienda was able to see it because she lived it. So she knows how men think because she was with them so much, doing masculine things, warfare, doing very masculine things. So she speaks from a position of authority because she speaks from a position of experience that Egwene doesn't have.
Yeah, cross-sex mind reading.
Giggity? Oh, I don't know. Okay.
That's the technical term for it.
Then there are a bunch of dreams, but I wasn't gonna spend time on that because a lot of them are I mean, some like the Matt one we've already seen and are seeing. And then the other ones are, I mean, I don't know how much we can talk about that anyway. Especially the big one, which was the White Tower is going to be attacked and she's going to and there's a Sanshan woman that's trying to help her and she doesn't like that. But then it does end with kind of a big deal, which is Anaya, who's a very likable character, and Egwene really likes her, has been murdered and murdered with Sidon, which the reader should immediately know what happened there because we have information she does not. Okay. I don't even remember what this bookmark is for. And then we get to two relatively brief, especially for Jordan, chapters within the White Tower. The first one is Alviarin finally returning after a long absence. And now, because she's been gone so long, again, back to the arrogance of Aes Sedai, you assume she was gone so long because she figured she had Elaida under her thumb. But now circumstances have changed. And so Elaida's the one, or Alviarin's the one under Elaida's thumb. And I do find it amusing the way the chapter kind of ends is that she is so vain and arrogant and incensed that now she's the one on bottom that she basically says out loud in her own mind that I'll invent something if I have to. I will invent a threat to the Black Ajah if I have to, if it gets me out of this situation. Because she's way too arrogant to endure what she's been putting Elaida through.
Which is funny because her downfall was exactly what you talked about earlier, is when you get punched on, you go punch down on somebody else. And every time Masana would punch on her, she would go punch on Elaida. And that's what spurred Elaida to start making the changes she was making, even though she was under a form of compulsion.
I do not remember why I bookmarked this page here.
Which page?
522 and 523. So we're nearing the end of what we're going to talk about here, which is then it switches to Pavara, who's a fun little character, and Tarna, who was the.
Is this where Tarna suggests bonding?
Yeah,
okay.
Bonding Ashaman. Which I don't remember what my thought was here. It's completely God.
Well, this is a good example of kind of a meta concept in real life. One thing as a scientist that I like and as a professional in a kind of a more theoretically based field, is when you come up with something and other people come up with the same thing at the same time, that's usually a very good indicator that y'all are on the right track. It's even better than someone building on your work, because you could have had something wrong and it build into something very wrong. Whereas a bunch of people independently come up with something on their own, then it's like, oh my gosh, what did we all have in common? Because that's probably the right thing. And Tarna is coming up with a thought independent of what the Ashaman are doing, what Cadsuane's people are doing, what all of these independent things are, entities are coming up with at the exact same time.
Yeah, good point. Right. So since I don't remember what the heck was my point there, we'll just go a couple pages to the end of the chapter, which is Pavara hands a note um to Tarna, and we don't know what's on the note, but uh apparently it's something big, because Pavara is thinking her stony face did not change even after she finished and let the paper roll back into a tube in her hand. This changes nothing, she said flatly, coldly. It only makes what I suggest more urgent. On the contrary, Pavara said, that changes everything. It changes the whole world. What the heck is in that note?
Wait, where's it at again?
526, the very last page of this chapter. The last page we're going to talk about today.
Okay, here we go.
I went looking, and I actually found on, I don't even know who this is writing this, but Lee Butler, whoever the heck that is, on Tor's website, the publisher, and it's oh wow, this is from 2011.
Tovine is the one that's with Logain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
Was it a note from Logain?
It's from Tovine. So now,
but I mean through Tovine.
Through Tovine,
yeah.
From Logain through her. Yeah, that's what I wonder. Now, according to this really old blog on Tor.com from someone who is doing a reread, and then blogging about it, his let's see. I remember there was quite a lot of argument post-Caught over whether her note told Pavara that the taint of Sidon had been cleansed, or whether it told that Ashaman had forcibly bonded Aes Sedai. The timeline for the note to have held the former information is tight. Logain and company arrive in Karheen 4 days before the cleansing happens. I don't know how he came up with a timeline so exact, but since he's writing on the publisher's website, I'm going to assume that he knows what he's talking about. And again, this is from 2011, so I believe Jordan was still alive at this point. Wait, when did he die? Maybe not. I don't remember. Anyway, so he has a very specific timeline here, and according to this guy, so Logain and company arrive in Karheen 4 days before the cleansing, and this scene with Pavara and Tarna is approximately 7 days after the cleansing. But I suppose it possible with what little I know about how long it would take a pigeon to go from Karheen to Tar Valon. However, I'm pretty sure we find out later that the note only mentions the failed attack on the Black Tower and the bonding thing, which indicates Tovine sent it before the cleansing began. He goes on anyway, but point being, I think if his timeline is correct, and I have no reason to think it's not, I think it's fair in assuming this isn't about the cleansing. It can't be. The timeline's too tight. So then I don't know though, is this just Jordan being overly dramatic? Because Pavara's point about this changes the whole world, I don't know what that would be other than the cleansing, because that's a big effing deal.
Yeah, and there's a specific, this changes the whole world, so that suggests an event versus just the fact that Tovine got herself in a bad place.
What I wonder if it, but then and I suppose it's quite possible that the Tower Aes Sedai would know nothing about this. Um, Something that would be in that note, that would have to be in that note, if Tovine explains her situation, is that it's Logain, he's back, and he's healed. So I suppose that could be a world changer if stilling gentling can be healed. And there's no reason to believe that actually no, because we're going to in a second, not in a second, but at the beginning of the next book, we're going to get an example of how they don't know that stilling gentling can be healed. They have no clue because of something that happens in the next book. And on that note, I suppose we should move on to the spoilery section since we are.
Yeah. I
Um,
I found one that was someone had found a way to heal gentling is one of the things. Ashaman bonded Aes Sedai's warders, and the taint on Satan was cleansed, are the three possibilities. Here's a fourth possibility. All three.
no, yeah, or some combination
Yeah,
thereof.
it's not necessarily a letter that says like that. It says, it's from Tovine through Logain through Tovine. Logain has bonded me as his warder, so you already imply he can channel,
Mm-hmm.
which implies that it can be gentling can be healed. He says the taint is clear, and so you've basically said all three of those things in one letter. Or Logain bonded me as his warder, and the taint is clear.
And you would think that even if they knew the taint was clear, that the arrogance of Aes Sedai in general and the man hating of the Reds in particular, they would still follow through with their plan of we need a way to control these people.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we see with Egwene,
Mm-hmm.
her whole problem with Rand is because deep down she thinks she should be controlling him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, deep down she thinks she should be in charge, and I think there's definitely a part of her that resents that he is actually the hero of this story.
Yeah. Well, you go back to what was it, her accepted test where she was the Amiralin seat and Rand was brought in chains. She showed her inner mind right there.
Well, not necessarily because we don't know exactly what the rings from the test pull, but we do see her reaction, which is she's thrown in jail because she refuses to do it, because that he's being brought to be not as the Dragon Reborn, but as a man who can channel, and she refuses to pass sentence to gentle and execute him.
But she still has no problem with him being in chains.
I mean, she didn't do it. He's brought to her that way. So I think that is being entirely too negative to her. If
I'll
you
have to
if you
reread that section
accuse her
because
of that,
I wonder I want to say there were thoughts about how this is what we need to do for the last battle, but we're not going to gentle him. We shouldn't gentle him.
I don't
And
remember
it was a
anything like that
mixture of her
because I
thoughts and
I don't think the Dragon Reborn thing is known yet because this happens in the Great Hunt. She just knows that he's a man who can channel, and I do remember that she doesn't know what's going on because of the weirdness of how the rings work. She's like, where am I, who am I, what's going on, for a moment, and so she doesn't know. Yeah, I remember because she looks around and says proceed, which seemed the thing to say because she doesn't know what they're doing, what's going on. She's just like, okay, what's happening here, proceed.
Mhm.
So she doesn't actually know what's going on.
Well, at bare minimum, she's where Moiraine was before her revelation. Yeah, he's
Yes.
needed and everything, but he needs to be basically the sword in my hand because I
Mm-hmm.
know it's best.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a man and he's stupid.
I mean, there's definitely an element of that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, I think was part of the point of Avienda's exchange there, is that, hey, Egwene, you should, you know, men aren't as dumb as you think they are. So you should take that into account when you're dealing with them in general, but Rand in particular, even though he wasn't necessarily the point of their conversation.
Yeah. So on to spoilers. Did you what were
You,
your main ones?
you had something spoilery that you wanted to talk about,
Yeah,
I thought.
I'm gonna hold to the fact that Egwene gets lucky in her assessment of how
Hmm.
many lives are going to be. So this is the spoiler because you have to know what happens. She gets captured, and while she's captured, the Shanshan come and blow everything up,
Hmm.
and
No,
then
but
she, then she
so
comes out of it, and the towers get back together through peaceful negotiations because of what happened with the Shanshan.
um well,
Had
sort
had
of.
had time kept going on, and then them do the assault, it still would have been a bloodbath in the middle of the streets.
So this is where the history nerd comes out, and Jordan was one as well, is that most sieges in medieval warfare didn't end in assault. They ended in a protracted siege and then a complete or negotiated surrender once, if you could isolate the stronghold, if you could isolate the city. And that's what Egwene's plan is. And you do get
Yeah, but
notes
I
from,
know what her plan was, but it didn't work before the Shanshan got there.
well, it was never going to work that quickly. That's not how siege warfare
Well,
works.
but I mean, she got captured, so it was never going to work. Once she got captured, there was no attempt to finish the job, and no leadership to do
The
so or talent to do
the
so.
job was mostly, it was a very good plan, and it mostly worked because I don't remember who was who, but one of them, her or Leanne, was able to completely Hearthstone the chain, and the other one was did it halfway. So it stuck out there like a bar, and then they were only able to lower half of the chain and get small ships through one at a time. So they weren't completely isolated like was the actual plan, which is what you want to do to starve out a city. They weren't completely isolated, but they were the balance had shifted because with the harbors open, Tarvalon was clearly in the better position, but now the besiegers, the Saladar, Rebel, Aes Sedai, and Bryne were in the more powerful position. So in that sense, her plan did work. Now, the fact that there is an outside element that comes in with the Sanchin attack, that's completely out of her control. But my point is, no, given enough time, this plan probably would have worked.
Except
It
that she
would
got
have under
captured, and which is my random event is the Shanshan. She was captured
yes,
before that, so the enemy won by capturing her.
but they didn't. And that, to me, that's
They would
I
have if they not been blown up by an outside random.
no. Egwene is winning.
No,
That's
they
why I
only
can't wait
shut
to get
down one piece of
no
one
no
harbor.
no 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 no. I'm talking about Egwene and other people think that she's done when she's captured, but because Elida won't or doesn't execute her, she's actually able to win a chunk of the White Tower over to her side. That's why I think her arc is so great, is because of the next book primarily. Because even captured, she's still winning.
But that never comes to fruition without the random event.
Well, no. That's post hoc rationalization.
She's a loved prisoner at this. Well, so is saying that Gareth Bryne was wrong. That's post hoc
No,
rationalization because of the
I'm
way.
not saying he was wrong. I'm saying he didn't have all the information because she kept her plan secret.
Well, that's also one of the reasons you got to hate Egwene, because her top general could have been privy to this thing.
Could have been and probably should have been, but basically
Yeah.
her plan was his plan, which was I'm going to get ships to block the harbor. And he says way early on, if I can block the harbor, I can win a siege. Hawkwing couldn't win because he was never able to block the harbor. So she's basically just executing his plan, which is block the harbor, starve them, wait them out. Now he would say that even with starving them, eventually it's going to have to come to an assault. Uh, it might not be
Well,
as big an assault, but eventually would have to come to an assault.
and they're still starving people. And it's
No, but
not,
yeah,
and
yeah.
in a siege, what people don't also realize is it's not the soldiers that end up starving because they get priority with the food.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Yeah.
citizens that
And,
are gonna
and
starve.
and and as you weaken people with malnutrition, that's another reason a big component to ending a siege is disease, because
Mm-hmm.
you have so many people packed together, and a lot of them are going to start being malnourished. So then you have rampant outbreaks that end most sieges.
And
Yeah.
it's a bottom-up death. It's the peasants first, then it's the
Mhm.
soldiers, then it's
Mhm.
the people who the soldiers are supposed to be protecting.
Yeah,
So
well, and you get that in the Shadow Rising, the scene I was referencing where Perrin is accidentally eavesdropping because he can't help it on the women's circle, and they're talking about that of we can't tell the men we're already on half rations, and the women are cutting their rations willingly to make sure that the men, the fighters, have enough food, and they're not making sure they don't tell them because the men would want their women taken care of because that's just a natural reaction, which is why Jordan has to be canceled. No, but the point being that the fact that the Sanshin quicken the end of the siege, really, it's nothing negative or positive on Egwene and her plan. Her plan was a good plan. It was 75% effective, and probably, just knowing how siege warfare worked historically, probably would have ended up with the besiegers winning. It didn't because of the way circumstances unfolded, but I don't think that's any sort of mark against Egwene, was my point. Because one, the plan mostly worked and it was a good plan as far as siege, medieval style siege warfare goes. And two, even after, the initial hiccup in her plan, which was her getting captured, she's still working on her own behalf. She's working to undermine Elida, and it is working. She is winning more and more and more sympathy, to the
but
point
but
where,
I think the
remember,
point was that more people are going to die this way, and had her siege plan worked, more people would have died.
possibly,
Well,
but it's a maybe versus the assault, which is a known. Lots of people will die if we assault them.
but soldiers,
Mhm. Mostly, there are still, yeah, in
because you wouldn't have
in a
dumped them in the
siege,
middle of Tarvalon, you would have dumped them in the tower.
in the tower grounds. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it would have been basically Elida's insurrection 2.0 with Gareth
Her
Bryne soldiers.
her hope is if we put them in a negative enough position. I'm assuming, and I'm reading into basically other things that Egwene has thought and said, which is
which
the point.
would be her hubris, because she should
Yes,
know Elida.
yes.
She should know Elida would let people die for her arrogance.
Well, actually, no, because they only know Elida, one, by reputation, and two, by the notes that they're reading. Because we'll see in the next book, she's actually surprised how bad Elida is. She doesn't know. She's shocked at how bad the state of the tower is, and that's one of the things that kind of turns her. It's one of the reasons she says, "No, you're not going to attempt to rescue me because the tower is crumbling from within, and I could do something with that. And also, I don't want to make it worse with an assault on the tower." Um, I lost my train of thought there. I don't know. That's all I really had. I didn't have any other spoilery things um, that I could think of. I don't remember anything popping up. Giggity.
No, I don't think so either. But part of it is because I, even in rereads before I start skimming through the Egwene chapters again. But
I, I'm curious your thought. I really want to get to the next book because it is one of my favorites, and a lot of it is there are the Egwene chapters, because in the next book I think the Egwene chapters are some of the best in the whole series. So I'm curious what you're going to think and what Scott's comments are going to be with regard to those. And we're moving along. We should definitely, with how much ground we covered, we should be able to get through the finale in one episode next time. There's a little bit of Rand stuff, and then we get back to Matt, and we have a little bit of Matt, but most of what's going to happen with him and
well, this will be good timing. So if we can get through the finale next week, then we'll take Thanksgiving off.
mm-hmm.
So just FYI, everybody, will not be here on Black Friday unless we just have something we really need to talk about. And then we could start with the next book on the 1st. December. So
Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to because I mean when it came out, I thought Knife of Dreams was incredible. I think I read it in a weekend because I it was one of those that I couldn't put down. Much like Dragon Reborn and Shadow Rising were like that too. I was interested from Eye of the World, and I saw why you and the other nerds kept talking about it down in the lobby of Parker Hall. But Dragon Reborn and Shadow Rising were the first ones that I binged because they were just I couldn't put them down. I
well,
needed to know what happened
I've
next.
stated from the beginning, Dragon Reborn was my favorite of the
Mhm.
three, of the three of the whole series.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of go back and forth on Dragon Reborn and Shadow Rising. When I'm reading Dragon Reborn, I'm like, oh yeah, man, this is the best. Uh, but when I sit back and reflect on it, I'm like, I think Shadow Rising is probably a little bit better.
Yeah, the only thing you don't get with Dragon Reborn is Rand is still kind of he takes the back seat in that one, even though he's not invisible,
Yeah.
because you're supposed to have that mystery of what's going on with him in his head.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see y'all. We will see y'all then. Before that, we'll have a Wednesday episode of some kind. Probably something terrible because everything is terrible.
Well, I want to go into more on that the police state stuff because I want to tell you something
Mm.
after we stop recording that's going to piss you off because I want you pissed off for next time.
Excellent.
Excellent.
We'll see y'all then.
All right, see you then.